All right, good afternoon, everybody. It is my absolute distinguished pleasure to introduce you to this panel. First of all, my name is Scott Hasbrouck, the CTO of Spacecoin. The folks up here have made an enormous, tremendous impact on this world of ours. First, on my furthest left, Dr. Michael Nayak, program manager and scientist at DARPA. Next to him is Tae-Lim Oh, the founder and CEO of Glua and the chairman of Spacecoin. Let's give out each of them a warm round of applause as I announce them. Next to Tae is General Wesley Clark, four-star general, formerly commanded NATO in the European Union. And closest to my left, Colonel Sidney Gutierrez, former two-time space shuttle astronaut and now the chairman of a rocket company. Okay, gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Everybody give them a warm round of applause. Let's start with you, Wes. General Clark, so you are a four-star general of the United States Army. You had an amazing career. At the end of your career, you were the Supreme Commander of NATO in the European Union. And now you spend your career advising high-technology business startups. So I think as it relates to this panel, my introductory question to you is, how has your military experience led you to technologies like blockchain and democratizing the rest of the world and decentralizing infrastructure? And we'd love to hear a few minutes of your thoughts on that.
So I've seen conflict zones, and I've seen a lot of underprivileged people who can't access modern communications. I saw it in Vietnam when I was there as an infantry company commander. I saw it in the Balkans. I've seen it in Latin America. I've seen it in Africa. And gradually, we've built the technology to bring these people in. We built mobile telephony. Then we have satellites. Now we have the internet. But what we haven't done is we haven't connected it effectively to enable people that are in the boondocks, totally unserved by mobile phones, by cell towers, or anything else, to inexpensively access the internet, to find market conditions, to sell their products, to find customers for their products, or to find what products they should be growing. There's about 2 billion people in this state, running from Africa all the way through Asia and into Latin America. And when you're dealing with a world that has a food crisis, that has inflation, that has energy problems, if you can bring these people into the global system, you can solve many of these problems. So that's why I'm in it. And I'm in it with this great company, Glua, and a great rocket launch system in Via. And we are going to bring these people into the modern economy.
All right, folks, you heard it straight from the general. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Next, Colonel Gutierrez, retired United States Air Force test pilot. You were the first US-born Hispanic astronaut, and you flew on the space shuttle not once but twice, first as pilot and then as commander. And you also served on the committee for return to flight from Challenger alongside Richard Feynman and Neil Armstrong. So you obviously have an enormous, broad experience, both technical and pilotage, of spacecraft. How has that led you to do what you do today, where you're leading a company dedicated to building reliable, small launch vehicles in Via space for technologies like what we're building at Spacecoin?
Thank you. Yes, I did have the chance to pilot the Columbia, and I was the commander of the Endeavor, but my opinion is probably formed just as strongly by my experience in the accident investigation of the Challenger accident, and also I served on the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel, and we made a number of recommendations to NASA that unfortunately weren't considered, but just prior to the Columbia accident. So my experience in all of those endeavors convinced me that if we're going to move out into space and make space available to everybody on the planet, including the underserved populations, the current rocket technology, liquid bipropellant engines, and solid rocket motors are not going to provide the levels of safety, reliability, and the cost performance that we need in order to expand that way. So when I left NASA, it was in my mind, I had the idea that the answer to this problem was a hybrid rocket engine. So for those of you that aren't too familiar with rocket engines, a hybrid is essentially a cylinder of solid fuel with a hole in the middle of it. That's called a port. And through that hole, you pump, using an injector and a valve, your liquid oxidizer. And then you ignite it. So essentially that port or that hole that runs through the middle becomes the combustion chamber for the rocket engine. So it's a very, very simple rocket engine. It has about 1,000 fewer moving parts than a hybrid rocket engine. And when I left NASA and Sandia National Labs, eventually I became involved with a company that today is VIA, and I've been working with other individuals to build that, taking a combination of about 6 innovative technologies that we have patented or patent pending. We've been able to make what we call a vortex hybrid rocket engine that performs as well as a liquid bipropellant, and at the same time costs much less and is more reliable and is safe. So that's half the problem, being able to get the satellites to orbit. At the same time that we were working on this, we realized that miniaturization in electronics and the increase in reliability of electronics would eventually enable small satellites to take the place of what used to be the big satellites. The catch is that in order for small satellites to work effectively and do their job for a company and for a user and for underserved populations, they need to be in a particular constellation. That means they need to be in various orbits. And they can't all be in the same orbit or they won't be able to perform their function. They won't have the coverage necessary for either Earth observation or communication or whatever function you're performing with them. So in order to put them in the correct orbit, you can't put all of them, like if you're putting up a constellation of 60, you can't put 60 of them on one rocket and send it up there because they won't provide you the coverage. They need to go into what we call a right-sized rocket. So they might have to go up in 6 different rockets instead of one rocket. So instead of having a large rocket that carries 60 satellites, you want a smaller one that maybe carries a dozen satellites at a time. So we designed our rocket to do that, to be a smaller rocket. In order to hit the right price point with that type of rocket, you need this vortex hybrid technology. So I believe the future is, I think the future is a combination between our companies because we're going to be able to deliver a safe, reliable rocket that'll put the customer's payloads, in this case GLUA and Space Telecommunications Inc., into the orbits they want on their schedule for a price that is going to enable them to hit the price point that the general was talking about so that underserved populations in the world can also have access to the benefits of space.
Thank you for that, sir. Appreciate that. Okay, over to you, Dr. Nayak. So you currently work at DARPA. You have a PhD in planetary sciences through the Air Force. You served also as a United States Air Force test pilot, so we have 2 test pilots on this stage. Your work at DARPA has focused on defense, space, and specifically lunar applications and cislunar applications. As you think about your career at DARPA and prior all of your technical experience, both as a pilot and an engineer and a scientist, I'd like to hear a few minutes of how you think about the challenges and the opportunities and how those balance in terms of decentralizing space infrastructure.
Sure, absolutely. So a big part of my work, both at DARPA and previously in my career, I think, has been to be a futurist and a trend analyst. And what that means is look at the state of technology today, see where it's going, and then envision a future that's different. And then how do we create technology that drags that different future into the present? So in other words, how do we imagine a different future than the one that we have today? And then create technology that drags that future into the present. So when I think about decentralized infrastructure, there's a huge opportunity space, Scott, that you've touched on that new space offers, and it's exploding. But today, that's in ones and twos, right? And that's what Colonel Gutierrez was also getting at, ones and twos. What we need to do is get to infrastructure. And the way that I think about this is the way that cities thrive today. So I live in Washington, D.C., but if I were to move here to Seoul, if I wanted to start a business here, I don't have to bring everything with me. I can just make a phone call and have power, plug in and get power. I can, access the internet pretty easily by just signing a quick contract. How do I do that in space, where today I have to bring everything with me? I have to bring my own power, my own data, my own comms, my own thermal. That's not how we get to infrastructure. So in terms of being a futurist, seeing a different future where we have space infrastructure, it's easily available, and anybody can access it, there are certain key technologies, and those are decentralized technologies by nature, that can drag that imagined future into the present.
It's a fantastic analogy of moving somewhere on Earth as it relates to how different it is to, say, move to space or to move to the moon. Now over to you, Tay. So you've focused on blockchain your entire career as an entrepreneur. You've founded Glua, and you're still its CEO. And now you've started this company with Spacecoin. You've been focused so much on emerging markets. You've now done 2 million loans, and over 2 million loans on CreditCoin, which has done enormous work in solving financial inclusion in Africa. And recently, we've now done so much work in forming critical partnerships in the government there. Clearly, you have a track record of not shying away from hard problems. So how does that relate to your thinking and decision-making and inspiration in deciding to tackle now space?
So I was unlucky to find a very interesting problem that is hard to solve. But some problems are worth solving despite of being very difficult to solve. And the mission of our company at Glua is to create a borderless infrastructure. Basically, our vision is to connect people from anywhere and anything. And since internet, we know that when people get connected, they can do amazing things together. And since blockchain, we learned that people can actually work with each other in a decentralized manner without acquiring trust to work together. And that inspired me to jump into the blockchain as my career. And first, with CreditCoin, I was trying to connect people in the developed market with a lot of capital to people in the emerging market, which has limited access to capital, but has a huge promise of growth. And moving on from the first version of CreditCoin, we recently started to work on the next version of the CreditCoin, which is basically connecting blockchain to blockchain. Currently, our blockchain ecosystem is isolated per blockchain. One wallet in Ethereum, for example, cannot transfer their funds to wallet in Solana because they don't talk to each other. There are technologies such as bridges and oracles that go around with this kind of problems, but it doesn't really solve the problem directly. The next version of CreditCoin we worked in this technology called Universal Smart Contract, which allows you to not only read information from other blockchains, but also write information to other blockchains. Moving on from this Web3 space, and also going back to the first version of CreditCoin, when we were deploying capital in Africa and in emerging market, one of the common problem that we were facing is many of the underserved, underbanked people that we wanted to deploy capital to are also unconnected. They have no access to internet. If you don't have access to internet, there's no way for us to interact with those people. So that I was fortunate to have Scott in my team, which inspired me to learn about aerospace and the CubeSat and the commoditization of the industry, which allowed our company to explore the possibility of deploying CubeSats to create a constellation and provide a decentralized connectivity to people who were before unconnected.
Thank you for that. I think actually hearing from all three of you sequentially in that way, you can kind of really draw the trend line and put it together. Reliable small launch vehicles, the challenges faced in emerging democracies and emerging markets, the challenges faced with connectivity in these markets, and then finally, just the challenge of space as an environment itself. This next question I'd like to open up to all four of you. Feel free to take it at whatever order you'd like, but the internet, it's one of the most profound human inventions, I'd argue probably since the printing press. The internet started mostly as a decentralized infrastructure. I mean, I remember it back in the 90s, it was dial-up, you had local internet service providers. Today, it's become very highly centralized. There's a lot of government control. There's 3 billion people estimated that have censored versions of the internet, along with the 3 billion disconnected. How do you all here on the stage think about this in terms of what are the potential economic impacts of re-decentralizing the internet and going beyond decentralization, how it used to be, and how does everything we just talked about reverse this trend of centralization of global communication infrastructure?
Okay, I'll go first.
Go for it.
Look, we're in an environment globally today where there is increasing distrust of governments. Now, whether that's right or wrong, we could debate that, but it's simply a fact that one of the impacts of social media has been to spread information, and people get good information, they get bad information, and there are some groups and countries who deliberately try to discredit governments and their actions. So what blockchain does is it provides an anchor point of trust. That's the essence of blockchain. And so when you decentralize the internet from one country to another, and remember we're talking about a constellation of satellites worldwide, we're talking about 2-3 billion people potentially who would have to go through their local government, their local phone company, or whatever, to be able to find market conditions or get an education or do the other things. Now we're talking about they've got an anchor point of trust that cuts across the distrust of governments, communities, corruption, etc. That's the whole theory of blockchain. Now, does that mean governments don't have a role? Of course not. But what it means is that while governments are worried about permits for fiber optic cable and other things and licenses for spectrum, you've got overhead, this incredibly flexible platform that can connect to the remotest area of South Sudan and help the woman who's there growing cassava for her family understand what the price is of cassava in Juba and put more cassava in the ground and sell it at a reasonable price, make a profit on it, and help alleviate global hunger. That's the simplest way to explain what this is, I think, Scott.
That's a really rather profound use case. Dr. Nayak, I think you have something to say.
Absolutely. That's a great setup. And so now taking blockchain into space, which is what you're trying to do, I think that's a great example. Why does decentralization matter there? My perspective on it comes from a national security point of view. I've done R&D in national security for most of my career. But national security, most importantly, is about preventing conflict. And so if I think about centralized comm nodes in space, I think that any adversary would view that as an advantage, right? Any conflict arises and is started because there's the potential for advantage. So while there are centralized comm nodes in space, there's the potential for advantage. When there are decentralized comm nodes, as the general mentioned, there's hundreds of thousands of satellites, or even hundreds of satellites, then there's very little advantage to starting any conflict in space. And so from a national security perspective, I think it benefits all of us. It benefits the whole world if we get to a place where there's just no point in conflict. And that's what I think decentralized space infrastructure can do.
That's a very profound comment, and I hope that we're able to reduce conflict through that. The thing that I really think about are out in all those underserved areas, the tremendous talent that is being wasted. I thought about the Middle Ages when there were many talented individuals who couldn't make a contribution because they didn't have the backing of a king or the backing of the church or the backing of somebody with money so that they could actually do some research and make a contribution. I'm hoping that by expanding the internet and connecting these people, there are a lot of talented individuals there whose talents are being wasted for the world and also for their societies. So I'm hoping we can bring them in and they can make the contributions that they really should be making. That's what I'm excited about.
Tay, any final thoughts?
As a business person, my thoughts about giving more options in the market. So the case I think about when I think about Spacecoin is when people had no option but sticking with one or two telcos in the market, then people get taken advantage of. For example, before the 3G was popular and the WhatsApp or like messengers are popular, people were paying very expensive fees to send SMS to each other. And that accumulated, and that it scared people from accessing the internet also. Because why? Because they had to pay too many dollars for reading simple news articles. By giving people more options, providing decentralized version of the internet that can enable multiple internet service providers so that people have options and choose what kind of service they want to get.
Thank you for that. And thank you all for your time. If you're interested in coming to build or invest in the future of global connectivity with us, our booth is right outside. I'll see you in the void.
All right, thanks, guys. All right.